Rupert and the Snow Puzzle. For days the weather in Nutwood had been bitterly cold. But the snow Rupert kept hoping for did not appear. "Oh dear, this is so tiresome," he sighed. "I so want to have a go in my toboggan." Then he had an idea. He found his daddy, who was working in the garden, and said, "There's quite a lot of very slippery frost about, and I wondered if I might be able to use my toboggan on it. Do you think it might work?" Mr. Bear looked doubtful. "I don't think so." Then, seeing that Rupert was very keen to go tobogganing, he added, "Still, it might be worth trying." So off scampered the little bear to find a good place to try out his idea. But he had not gone far when someone called, "Hey, Rupert! Where are you off to with that toboggan?" He turned to see his pal Bill Badger running towards him. When Bill heard of Rupert's idea to toboggan on frost, he said, "It might just work. But we'll need a long downhill run to keep moving. Let's find the right sort of slope." The two pals had reached the outskirts of Nutwood when they met the squire. When the old gentleman heard what they planned to do, he smiled and said, "Well, there are plenty of good long slopes on my estate. You're welcome to try them if you like." He ushered the delighted pair through his gates. "You can try tobogganing here to your heart's content," he told them. Then, as he turned to go, he added, "By the way, keep your eyes open for a bunch of my keys I dropped yesterday." The pals promised to keep a lookout. As they started uphill, they saw a strange hump in the grass. "Let's keep clear of that," said Rupert. "It could cause a nasty spill." At the top, Rupert and Bill found a promising slope. Bill volunteered to go first, and Rupert was about to give him a push when something white flashed past their heads. "Hey, who threw that?" yelled Bill angrily, and jumped off the toboggan. He was starting towards some bushes when a shout from Rupert stopped him. "I say, Bill, this stuff's snow!" "Impossible!" exclaimed Bill. "We've had no snow." Then he examined the white stuff Rupert had scooped up. "You're right," he said. "But how?" The pals puzzled over the snow and who could have thrown it. But no more appeared, and since there was no sign of anyone, they decided to go on with the tobogganing. Rupert gave a hefty push. The toboggan raced off, swaying and bumping alarmingly. Bill struggled to control it, but suddenly it hit a bump, flew into the air, overturned, and poor Bill was pitched headlong over some bushes. As Rupert plunged into the bushes after Bill, he heard a shrill voice scolding, "Do be careful! You nearly knocked me over!" Next moment he saw his pal lying on the ground, looking up at a strangely clad little person. "Why, Jack Frost," he started to say. Then he saw the newcomer was a girl. "Do you know my brother Jack?" she demanded. Rupert explained that he had met Jack several times and asked how he was. "Busy elsewhere," said the girl. "That's why I'm here doing his Nutwood job. I'm Jill Frost." "Oh, I say, are we going to have snow after all?" asked Rupert. "I'm afraid not," said Jill. "The clerk of the weather hasn't arranged for any for Nutwood." Just then Bill said, "I do ache after that spill. I'd best go home, I think. You stay here with Jill." And off he limped. He had hardly gone when another volley of snowballs narrowly missed Rupert and Jill. "Right, this time I'm going to find out who threw those snowballs," vowed Rupert, and he ran towards a copse from where he was sure the snowballs came. Pushing through the bushes, he was just in time to see the Fox brothers, Freddy and Ferdy, dash off giggling, their arms full of snowballs. He turned back to Jill. "Where did they get snow?" he asked. "That's the mystery." "More of a mystery than you think," retorted Jill, who had picked up a handful. "This is last year's snow. I can tell. The clerk of the weather must be told. There's something very odd here." She thought for a moment. "Rupert," she said, "I want you to come too. You see, I've played so many pranks on the clerk he mightn't believe me. He'll believe you, though." "But how?" Rupert began. "Simple," Jill laughed. "Lie on the toboggan, hold tight. Right?" And she threw some powder into the air. That powder is to summon a wind to take us, Jill explained. Listen, can you hear it coming? Rupert listened, and in the distance he could hear a howling growing ever louder. Suddenly the noise was all around him, and Rupert found himself swept high into the air, still clutching his snowball. He felt much less frightened when he saw Jill flying along beside him. Now they were travelling along a sparkling band in the sky. "It's a frozen rainbow!" shouted Jill. "A frostbow!" At the top of the frostbow, Jill called, "We shall be going down now even faster, so hold on and don't drop that snowball." Down, down they raced, faster and faster, until Rupert thought they would never be able to stop. Then they shot through a bank of cloud, and just ahead lay a cluster of strange spires and towers. "We're here!" Jill cried. "This is where the Clerk of the Weather lives." Jill seemed to have some strange control over the wind, for, at a clap of her hands, it changed to a gentle breeze, which wafted them both down onto a sort of terrace. Jill knew the way, and telling Rupert to leave his toboggan behind, she led the way up a flight of stairs. It led to a tower, where the clerk himself was working. The fussy little man's face fell when he saw Jill. "Oh dear, not more of your tricks," he sighed. "Oh no," said Jill. "This is truly important. This little bear, Rupert, will tell you about it." So, rather nervously, Rupert launched into his story of the mysterious snowballs, and how Jill had said that they were last year's snow. "Oh my!" exclaimed the little man. "I suspect she is playing tricks on you too." He agreed, however, to examine the snow, and when he did, he couldn't believe his eyes. "It is last year's snow," he cried, "but how has it lasted?" Shaking his head, the Clerk of the Weather led the friends to a set of shelves stacked with jars. Each jar had a year marked on it. "Snow," explained the clerk. "I have a sample of every year's snow, right back to the year 1820. Every year, that is, except last year's. Strangely enough, I forgot to take a sample in time, so I'm very grateful for this lot you've brought. Now my records will be up to date." "Rupert is very disappointed there's to be no snow in Nutwood this year," Jill broke in. "Disappointed?" said the clerk. "You mean you want heavy snow?" "Oh, please," cried Rupert. Murmured the clerk. "I may just be in time." He consulted a ticker tape, then led the way to a strange wheel thing, where he pulled levers and pressed buttons. "There," he said at last. "I have switched a blizzard meant for Alaska to your Nutwood. Now, quick to the launching pad." Wondering what on earth was going to happen now, Rupert was hustled by Jill out of the Clerk of the Weather's workshop, then through passages and upstairs, collecting Rupert's toboggan on the way. At last they reached a high platform. "We're not a moment too soon," Jill panted. "Look!" Rupert turned to see a huge bank of dark cloud looming over them. Before the little bear realized what was happening, he was swept off his feet by a howling snowstorm and carried into the air, clutching his toboggan. "Don't struggle," cried Jill. "Just let the storm carry you along." When he did relax, Rupert found that he was really quite comfortable. But he still found the darkness and the howling of the wind rather frightening, and he was glad when it started to grow light and he found they were gradually dropping to earth. He got ready for a bump, but instead landed gently in deep, soft snow. "Is this better?" laughed Jill, as Rupert picked himself up. "Oh, yes," he said. "I do hope everyone else thinks so." "They'll like it a lot more than what they were going to get," Jill said. "Frost, fog, and icy winds." Then she turned and skipped away, crying, "Well, I must get on with my work." "Thank the Clerk of the Weather for being so kind," Rupert called after her. Later, as he made his way homeward through the squire's estate, he saw the gamekeeper clearing snow from a mound. "Hello, Mr. Foster," Rupert said when he came up to him. "What are you doing?" The man held up his hand. "Listen. Can you hear voices from inside this mound?" he asked. Rupert listened hard. "Yes," he exclaimed. "Then help me dig them out," the man cried, and handed him a spade. They dug desperately, and in a little while they uncovered a wheelbarrow, then a low door, with a bunch of keys still in it. "I thought this was just a great heap of snow," Rupert exclaimed. "Oh, no," the gamekeeper said, as he tugged to open the door. "It's a sort of vault below a grassy mound." Of course, Rupert thought, that's the bump Bill and I saw on our way up the hill. The heavy door swung open, to reveal Freddy and Ferdy Fox shaking with cold. Ferdy shivered as they staggered out on stiff legs. "We're frozen!" Curious to see inside the strange underground room, Rupert ventured into it. In it, he saw snow heaped on the floor, and on low benches too. What's Snow doing inside, he wondered, and why were the foxes in here? He returned to the others in time to hear Ferdy say, "It was awful in there. We went to get some more snow, and then that blizzard came and snowed up the door." "Oh, yes," Freddy wailed. "It all happened so quickly we didn't have a chance to get out. Oh, and it was so dark and cold." Now he was sure the foxes were not really hurt. The gamekeeper held up the bunch of keys he had taken from the door. "The squire lost these keys yesterday," he said grimly, "and I think you two have some explaining to do." So Ferdy and Freddy told their story. They had found the keys, they said, when they were taking a short cut through the estate. They had discovered that the keys fitted the door in the mound, and when they found the snow inside, they took some for fun. But when they had finished, Rupert still had some questions. "Mr. Foster," he began, "Jill Frost says the snow in there is last year's snow."
"True," chuckled the gamekeeper. "Been there since last winter, but that is something for the squire to tell you about. Meanwhile, these foxes are going to make amends for their pranks."
Ordering the brothers to bring the wheelbarrow, he led them off to clear the snow from the squire's drive. As he raced downhill on his way home, Rupert decided to call on Bill to see how he was after his spill. Mrs. Badger was clearing snow from the path when he arrived, and ushered him indoors, where Bill was snug in an armchair. Once Rupert was sure Bill was feeling much better, and they had laid plans for tobogganing next day, he told his chum about his adventure. "I still don't know, though, why last year's snow was stored in that underground place. I shall have to ask the squire." And strangely enough, who should be talking to Mr. Bear when Rupert got home but the squire himself. "Ah, the squire has something to say to you, Rupert," said Mr. Bear.
I've just been talking to my gamekeeper," the squire began, "and he tells me you helped him rescue the foxes and, as it happens, find my keys. Thank you. Mr. Foster also told me you wondered why I'd kept last year's snow. Well, I'll tell you."
The squire unrolled an old paper he was holding and laid it on the table.
"Last year," he said, "I found this old plan of all the buildings in my grounds. In it, I discovered that the cellar under that mound was an old ice house. Snow and ice could be stored in it all year round, so that the owner of the estate could keep things cool in warm weather. I tried it out with some of last year's snow, and you've seen how fresh it still is."
So at last Rupert knew the answer to the snow puzzle. As the squire and he walked to the gate, Rupert said, "It was lucky you kept some of last year's snow." But before he could explain about the clerk of the weather, the two foxes appeared and mumbled their apologies to the squire. "And we're sorry for throwing snowballs at you, Rupert," Ferdy said. "Oh, that doesn't matter," laughed the little bear. "You missed anyway. I say, why not come tobogganing with us tomorrow?"